so much for that lovely introduction. It took away everything I was about to say about myself there. Thank you so much again to Marilyn Fowler and to the WIN organization. This is something that's very dear to my heart as a survivor of severe domestic violence in my past, and today as an empowerment counselor. This is something that is truly a necessity for me to eradicate from our population and from the homeland of my family in Guatemala, who I have the privilege of seeing every third year. So when I was asked to have this assignment to be able to speak on Guatemala and all the issues and how CEDAW has impacted and the movement that's happening there, it was an honor for me to be able to step up to that plate, and another reason for me to get that much more bonded with my family and the women especially, because in Guatemala the domestic violence is just a common day, everyday theme there, even amongst my family. It's the theme of prostitution, the theme of drug abuse, and now with the Colombian drug lords that have been driven out of Colombia are now in Guatemala, right in my neighborhood, in the neighborhood of the barrio where my family is being raised and where they have lived over, wow, my grandmother's in her 90s, over 90 years. So I'm here to give a little bit of a report on what is happening there in Guatemala from the viewpoint of not just my family, but from my own personal findings that supported their personal experience, as well as what's happening with the scientific research that's happening there. So.
And that's pretty much what we'll be talking about.
Just give me a minute to okay, good. So the facts that are happening right now over there and the things that are main issue is that CEDAW has had an impact, but unfortunately at a turtle's pace, because change is never comes very easily and never comes at the speed that we would like it to happen. So right now what's taking place is the lack of funding and financial resources that are happening to ensure that these laws are put into effect. That is a huge issue there, because there is a lot of talk about how to implement these new programs, but without financial or man resources, we just remain at a turtle's pace where we're just talking and talking and talking about it. But the big thing that is happening, though, that is a positive, is that the women are ever so grateful that they are even being asked to be brought in to be discussing these issues, that they're being asked to sit on boards about peace and negotiations at the UN level. So that is something that is massive. So no longer is it a secrecy, no longer is domestic violence or prostitution or especially child trafficking a dirty little secret that's happening there. It's now in the open. And you will hear the indigenous women now at bus stops discussing it, which is massive, because women at bus stops, or women in general, were not even allowed to speak. You sat there silently, and I recall that growing up. You would sit there very silently, and I was from America, speaking openly and very articulate and boisterous against the armies that I would see on the corners, thinking, what right do they have to stand here and intimidate us? And I remember very young, 10, 11 years old, and my mother would be like, shh, please, mijita, we're gonna be ended amongst the missing. And to me, I thought, how appalling to even be told that, but that was the reality. And for me to be hushed at a young age, she did her best, but it didn't quite always work. But there in Guatemala, I did see how oppressed the people were, and so now to be able to see the difference that CEDAW has implemented this, has given the courage and the insight to the women to have a reason why they can stand up and speak out. And that is something that's very huge. Though it's moving at a turtle's pace, the sense of self-worth and a sense of self-righteousness and what they must do for their country and for their children is stirring up quite a bit. And for that, they are very, very grateful. And what else? There's also the initial charge in the air is palpable, but at the same time it fizzles out. So that also causes some depression among some of them, because especially the ones that are very active and advocating in the forefront, there's a lot of charge, like there is coming to the UN, but then you take all this information home and what do you do with it? So that can be very disheartening to the people and to the indigenous women of Guatemala. So it's something that we also have to look at, because there is also there's also not enough mental health resources. There simply is not, and there's especially not any mental health resources to address the women and the trauma that they have sustained over the last 40 years of civil warfare there, and the impact it had on them and their families, our families, because my family was also, 3 of my family members were amongst the missing, and 2 were found tortured and on the side roads of the freeway. So that is something that still impacts us, and it's horrific for us to have to deal with, and to the memories of remembering the phone calls that would come in from Guatemala, and that my family suffered at the hands of this, at the most atrocities, the most horrific atrocities, especially being tortured alive. So that was something that was very grave for us. So that still is a factor. And the fact that there is the lack of mental health resources for them, but there's also the child prostitution. It is still huge. Child trafficking, which seems to be actually increasing all throughout the land, all throughout the globe, it seems like. But the child prostitution, as well as prostitution in general, because there is not enough funding, and there's not enough education. So a lot of people lack in emotional intellect, but also the psychology behind what it is to honor yourself and honor your bodies, and the simple survival technique that is, they need food to feed their children, they need food to survive, and they need resources, they need homes, they need clothing, they need the most basic of things. So one of the quickest and easiest ways to acquire money is an old tradition in Guatemala. So, and it's not looked upon as something bad necessarily amongst the families, but it is prohibited. But again, if there's not enough funding and enough manpower to be able to eliminate this, it's not going to end anytime very soon. And that's another thing, is men in Guatemala see their manhood in how many children they have. My uncle had 17 children, and he was very proud of boistering about this. And he took care of maybe 3 that lived in our home, my direct first cousins. And he would brag about it to the day he died, you know. But was he fathering any of them? No, he added to the genetic gene pool, but he did not father them, but he took much pride, and he was seen as quite an icon in the neighborhood. He was Uncle Chito, he was seen as quite the man. But it was something that still to this day has to be taken out of the social attitudes of the men and women, because the women are ever so proud of being able to have these machismo men's children. It is for them quite a prize to be able to make that statement, though they suffer because they don't have any income coming in to support these children they have by these different men. So that is something that's huge still on the issues of concern. So I was going to actually leave for the Q&A. I wanted to leave, like, what can we do about this? Not just starting here in the States. What can we do for the land of Guatemala and the indigenous women there? But I'm going to leave that open to the Q&A discussion and do some brainstorming during that time. So thank you so much for allotting me this time to speak to you all on my family's origin.